What's going on, people, and welcome back. Firstly, I just want to apologize for my last video. Man, my energy just wasn't there. It was like 1,000 degrees that day. Today it is cold and raining, which just shows you how fucked up the weather here is in this country. But I showed you my recording template, so now I want to show you my current mix template. I do have some previous videos on mix templates, but this is my most current one as it changes constantly. So yeah, this is the template that kind of every single mix you hear from me is built on. Just a really good starting point, a way that, like I stressed in my previous video, like I just need everything to be really quick and really efficient. When you're doing tons of mixes a week, you really just want to spend as less time setting up and loading up plugins and all of that stuff as possible, because time is money. Time is money. So let's start at the very top, and this right here, this track is my reference track. So what I do is I pull in like the demo mix, the rough mix, or even just like a reference track the artist has asked me to reference. I drag it into there, and then I have a button here on my Mackie Big Knob that you obviously can't see because there's no like face cam, but when I press that, it switches between my current mix and the demo mix. So I can just quickly switch between both of them really easily. So I have that track there just because it is very quick. I've got a feeling, is this the right template? Yeah, it is. I had a feeling I was using the wrong template for a second there. But as you can see on here, it has the Sonarworks reference 4, and I usually have this on both my master track and this reference track, and I have it to 25%. I don't want it to be super flat. I just want the curve to be a little bit flatter than it naturally is. So if you don't know what Sonarworks reference 4 is, you measure your room using a microphone, and then it kind of fixes some of the problem areas in your room when playing back music. I'm guessing using EQ and panning and things like that, but I'm not 100% sure on the science behind it. But it is good, but I just prefer not to have it on 100 because I feel like it's too perfect then. And I do like the sound of my room. I'm used to the sound of my room, etc. And yeah, that's just the reference track there. Below that, we have Hyperx drums and drum parallel. So these are all of kind of like the main drum buses. So my drums will kind of go up here in between reference and Hyperx. All of the like kind of bongos and shakers and stuff would go onto this Hyperx track, and everything else would go to the drums and drum parallel. I don't always use parallel processing on drums. A lot of people do, but you can run into a lot of phasing issues. So if my drums sound good without any parallel processing, I just won't bother. Just so I don't have to worry about whether it's out of phase and all of that kind of thing. But I'll show you what's on each of these tracks. We have two PS, hold on, let me just get both of these up so you can see them. The PS22 spread, I guess it's called. This is a complete Jason Joshua ripoff. I believe it's on YouTube for free, so I'm not like giving away any secrets or anything. But this is really good for, like I said, things like Hyperx specifically, anything kind of like shakers or congas or little percussion loops. This sounds really good on, and it just makes things just sound a little bit more interesting in the stereo field. Again, a Jason Joshua ripoff. So all of my Hyperx go to this track and then to my drums. This is my drums track that pretty much all of my drums go to. We have a VMR on there. Boom. With the virtual mix bus, which you've seen in my previous video, and the Monster. Now this, I've never actually used this with the mix knob all the way up. I usually have it just on like 15%, and this just opens up my drums really nicely. It just brings out all the little details in the drums, makes it sound a lot more bottom heavy. I love it, and I use it all the time. With these settings, I very rarely change the settings. I usually just unbypass this and my drums just sound better. So this little setup here is just like a better maker. Just makes things sound better. We have a standard clip, which I don't always use. It's good with things like if your demo mix, if the demo mix you get in, the drums are really, really kind of saturated and distorted and kind of really heavy. Obviously you want to clean those drums up, but you don't want it to lose that flavor, because that's the flavor that the producer made, even though it was unintentionally. Like, you know, things like distortion aren't always done intentionally, but sometimes when you take away that distortion, you take away that saturation, it kind of, sometimes there's just a little something missing. So soft clippers are really good for that, because you can kind of just like add a little bit of saturation, add a little bit of like in your faceness without it sounding horrible, basically. So standard clip is there. The SSL compressor, boom, you know, I like the SSL compressor, and a Pro Q2 with a little roll off there. These are what I use more often than not, but with everything else in this template, sometimes I won't use the SSL compressor. Sometimes I might swap this out for something else. Sometimes I won't use the standard clip. Sometimes I might do a little bit more EQing or whatever. This is just kind of like a starting place with most plugins, and most of these things on here aren't set in stone. The parallel track here has a Saturn on it with this preset Crispy Fats. It has a decapitator and an FG Gray with another preset which is aggressive. So that's kind of usually my setup on parallel processing. Sometimes I might swap this out for the DBX. I kind of like the DBX quite a bit on my parallel drums, on my parallel track. But more often than not, I'm using the decapitator and the Saturn II just to give the drums a little bit of more weight. You usually put the volume on like, you know, just like that or something, just to sit under your main drums. But like I said, you do have to start considering phase issues, which can become a problem sometimes. And if you're not that great at using your ears yet, if you're still kind of starting off, I would be careful with parallel processing on drums, because your kick can just disappear and you're sitting there thinking, why is my kick just not kicking? And it's because of, it's out of phase because of parallel processing. But I'm not going to get too deep into that in this video. So these 3 tracks here go into this all drums bus, which as standard has a what are these called again? I completely forgot. The Brainworks Digital version 3. This is good because you have this mono maker. I love this mono maker here, because you want all of those bass frequencies to be mono. Like I'm a big fan of spreading out 808s and things like that, but anything under like 50, 60 hertz, you want that to be mono. So I always have that mono maker on. I like this little cut here in the mono section as well, to give space for other instruments and vocals and things like that. But normally I just load it up and I'll just have it like this, just as standard. And then if, you know, I need to do a little boost, I can do. An R-Bass, which, you know, we spoke about 1,000 times on this channel. R-Bass is great on drums, 808s, and a virtual tape machine. I do like the virtual tape machine, but I find myself using it less and less. It can be a little bit too much sometimes. I think you can like lower the bass alignment and stuff like that. But sometimes I get my drums sounding really good, and then I decide to put a tape machine on it, and it gets too much. So a good thing to do that I know some people do is top down. So they just have the tape machine on there all the time, just mixing into it. But I'm a believer of if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like if you get something sounding good or sounding like you really, really like it, I try not to keep adding plugins saying, oh, this might work, this might work, this might work. So yeah, I find myself using the virtual tape machine less and less. Yeah, and that is basically my drums for now. We do have a drum and bass bus down here, which we'll get to. But here is a pretty interesting part of my mixing, pretty important part as well, is I've split I always split my bass into two sections, the lows and the highs. This works really well with 808s especially. So you mix the lows of the 808s and the highs separately. And what I like to do is have these two going into this bus, this bass bus, where I can control them both at the same time. But like I said, I do have different plugins on different sides. So here you can see we've got an EQ, which is just kind of targeting that low end. And on this one down here, we have an EQ just targeting the high end. So only the low end will come through this bus and only the high end will come through this bus. We have a compressor on there. EQ. Okay, yeah, so it depends. Sometimes I just copy down this EQ, sometimes I don't. I just leave it. It depends on how much character the 808 already has. If it already has a lot of high end in it, then I won't bother with these two EQs here, and possibly even this EQ. I might just kind of do like a roll off like that or something, or something of that nature. But yeah, we've got EQ, we've got, of course, another compressor here. Now, I'll either use, obviously I like to use distortion on this high track, this bass high track. And that's so I can really emphasize the highs of the 808 and really get them to stand out in laptop speakers, phone speakers, and things like that. So my two distortion plugins of choice, or saturation plugins of choice, are the Decapitator and this Green Screamer. Again, it really just depends on the type of sound that I want, but I won't ever use them both at the same time. So it's usually one or the other. And it really just depends on what kind of sound I want to go for. And then we have the Little Tool Micro Shift, and that's so I can make the high ends of the bass sound really big and wide, without affecting the lows. So this is only on the highs. Like I said before, you want the sub to be dead center, and kind of, you know, everything from like 100 up, you can start messing around with the sound field. And that's why we use the little micro shift. I usually just go through the presets and just see what sounds best. Usually I probably have the mix on like middle, but yeah, I'll just go through the presets more often than not. You don't want to completely change the bass sound. That's not what we're trying to do. If you get a mix in and the producer is happy with the way the 808 sound, you can't go around just completely changing the way the 808 sound. You want it to be a subtle difference that makes a big, well, no, sorry, let me rephrase that. You want to do subtle changes that make a big difference. Both of those basses are going to this bass bus, which has VMR on there, and this is a really nice little setup that I'm enjoying at the moment. So the distressor on 1-to-1 mode, so it's not actually doing any compression, it's just adding that distressor sound to it, a little bit of distortion, a little bit of saturation, and this virtual mix bus on the Brit N setting. And that just gives it a really nice flavor. It gives your bass, again, that bit of top end that sometimes we neglect to put in our mixes. When it comes to bass, we just think sub. But it's nice to have a little bit of like a higher frequency flavor so that your bass stands out and sounds good on all speakers, not just big studio KRKs and all of that shit. As I said, the drums and the bass goes to this drum and bass bus. And I like to do a little bit of compression and other bits to my drum and bass together. So I mix them separately. I have been asked this before, do I put my 808s into my drum bus? The answer is no, but I do still do a little bit of process on them together. So usually I'll have this Shadow Hill mastering compressor, and I'll do about 1 - 1 decibels of gain reduction on it. Sometimes I use this black box here. Again, it's one of those plugins that if you have everything sounding good already, I just think, why am I adding more stuff on there? And the black box can be one of those ones that you just end up slapping on, and it just completely changes the sound of what you've achieved so far with your drums. But what I do like using is my SSL Fusion, which is a hardware piece of equipment I've got on my desk. I will bust my drum and bass through that a lot of the time just to give it that analog feel. Really does depend on, again, if the drums and bass sound fine, it sound good, sound perfect, I'm not doing anything else to them. I'm not trying to do too much, because there's just no need, I don't think. Although I love adding that analog sound to my mixes, it's not by force all the time. Unless of course, the project you're working on is a big project with lots of funding behind it and you've got a lot of time to experiment and you're being paid well, then I will experiment and I'll swap out the plugins for more hardware and things like that. But for me, it just is about feel. If I'm feeling good about something, I don't want to mess that up by just adding bare plugins on. But like I said, this is just a starting point. I might add more plugins. I might take away plugins. These are not set in stone. I really want to get that through to you. So don't ask me for my template or anything for it to download. This is not something you can just put your stems in and it's going to sound great. These are just starting points. Again, we have the digital version 3. Again, it's just the same thing as before. Sometimes I might use it on the drums. Sometimes I might use it on both. Sometimes I might not use it at all. It really depends. Then all of my music goes to this bus. So, you know, synths, pianos, guitars, strings, anything that's not drums goes to music. Some people like to split it up and have like brass, strings bus, vocal bus, like a like vocal sample bus. Sometimes I do that, but more often than not, I just kind of add the plugins I need to add to the track separately and then just bus them to this music bus. Usually there's not a whole lot that needs to be done. Sometimes I'll just add a bit of saturation. I love using this on anything music related. Rather than EQ, I love using the Saturn as a way to get certain frequencies to pop in a really interesting way. So rather than using EQ, we're using a multi-band saturation plugin like the Saturn. I'm sure there are others out there, but this is the one that I like. We just have a VMR there again with the virtual mix bus. Sometimes I might add a little micro shift on there or something if it needs spreading, or an EQ. You know, I might just load up an EQ. But like I said, more often than not, the type of tracks that I work with, there's only usually, 5 or 6 musical elements. I'm not usually working with 100 different brass sections and guitars and things like and strings and all of that stuff. So usually just busting it through this music bus is fine. And then all of my instrumental goes to this instrumental track so that I can just if I get out my mixer, so that I can just use the fader to turn down the beat if necessary. So when everything's at a good place, if the beat's too loud for the vocals, I can just turn down the beat. If the vocals are too quiet, I can just turn up the vocals. Like, it's good to have these purple buses here, these purple tracks here are really important when it comes to the end game. When you're just doing tiny little adjustments, it's important to have an instrumental bus and a vocal bus, etc. So beneath that, we have the lead vocals. Pretty self-explanatory. Anything that's a lead vocal, so the chorus lead vocal, the verses, all go to this lead vocals track, and that's where I do the majority of my mixing. I do stuff on the individual tracks, which I explained a little bit in my previous video, the recording template video, but mostly I do it on this track here. I am going to do a video after this where I show you exactly how I utilize these different buses and how I set up my mixes. So if you're interested in that, make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you ding that bell. On here, we have an R compressor, which sometimes gets used, but more often than not, I use the Console 1. We have a Tube Tech, and we have the Poichild compressor. Now, I won't use all 3 of these at a time, but I will more often than not, either use a compressor in the VMR, the R compressor, the Tube Tech, or the Poic-Chow, depending on what kind of sound I want. All right. So if, for example, I just want to add some more weight to my vocal, I want a really weighty compressor, then I'll just use the Tube Tech. If I want a clean sounding compressor but my vocals are a little bit too punchy, so I want a quick compressor, then I use the Poic-Chow, etc, etc. You know, there's tons of compressors in the VMR. So yeah, it's just about picking and choosing and figuring out what sounds best for what situation. But these three are kind of like my favorite compressors. The DSR for vocals. We've got a DSR, pretty self-explanatory. EQ. This is a preset. Again, it's a Jason Joshua preset that I found interesting, so I like to keep it there. But yeah, I very rarely use it. I very, very rarely use it. It's kind of, I mean, you're welcome to copy this if you want, but it's kind of like a big scoop. So if your vocals are a little bit too boomy, maybe the vocalist was a little bit too close to the mic, this is a nice little preset here because it just scoops out those lows a little bit. But I don't use that often, I'll be real with you. We've got a Soothe and a Spiff, my two kind of most used plugins, I reckon, I'd say. Like this combination right here, this is what I call the dream team. Like these two plugins in conjunction can really, really it's just the icing on the cake for vocals, man. It's just that last little bit of cleanup that it really, really elevates your mixes to the next level. So the Soothe is just getting rid of some of the harsh frequencies, like as a really, really, really quick description. And I use the Spiff to get rid of mouth clicks. This preset here is great. Remove mouth clicks. Just in conjunction, these two plugins here, very simply put, it just smooths out the vocals. It just makes it sound much more finished, I think. So more often than not, I'll slap them on, even if I've just got the depth all the way down on both of them. But pretty much all of my vocals will have at least one of these plugins on it, if not two. And a C6. A C6 is good for like if you've just got a stubborn frequency somewhere. Just doing a sharp little cue like this and just compressing the hell out of it can just get rid of that. Like, so for example, if there's like a certain frequency in the S's or a little whistling or some sort of like awkward resonance, the C6 is perfect for that. We have all of our reverbs and delays, which I'll get into in a sec. And then the lead vocals go to our all vocal bus. We've got background vocals here, which is anything like doubles, stabs, anything like that gets bussed to this background vocals, which again has all of our effects on it. And then both of these tracks get bussed to the all vocals, which has a virtual mix bus, of course, a flanger, an ensemble, a SSL compressor, and a little micro shift. And mostly this is just for textures. So the air flanger, I might just add a little, 4% on there. The same with the ensemble, I might just add just a little bit, just to make our vocals sound a little bit more like they got a texture, a little bit wider, and they just move a little bit more. Very, very subtle stuff that we're adding to this. Even the micro shift, I might add just like 3.5% or something like that. And then the compressor is just to glue everything together. And sometimes I'll add like an EQ if I'll go away and I'll listen to the mix on my headphones and I think, there's just too much bottom end on this, then I might add a little EQ on the all vocals and just do a little cut on the all vocal track rather than go through and go to the individual track and EQ it like that. And then below that we have all of our effects, which I know a lot of you asked me about my effects. So let's get into it. I usually have everything inactive. If you haven't watched my previous video, I explain how sorry, I explained how I just like to have all of my plugins inactive unless I'm using it, so that it's not using unnecessary CPU power. On my Reverb 1, it's just like a small room reverb, just to kind of open up the vocals a little bit so they're not so dead. Like, you know, although having recording in a dead room is it's not important, but like, you know, you want as little interference when you're recording from your room as possible. Sometimes you do just need to put that back in though. So I have this little Reverb 1, which I always use. Just one, it makes the vocals sound a little bit brighter, and two, it makes it sound just less dead. So it's a small wooden room reverb. I can't remember if this was a preset or if it's something that I kind of just found on my own. And then I have an EQ on top of it. My Reverb 2 is it's quite a bright reverb. We have the H delay, and that gives us our pre-delay. So it's simply put, this is just working as this pre-delay knob. So instead of using this pre-delay knob, we're using an actual delay. Very, very fast delay though. And the feedback is non-existent. Then we have the Valhalla. Then we have a Pro Q2. Then we have a Valhalla with the mix knob to 50. We've got this EQ, again, doing this little cut in the mids to make room for our vocals. And then we have an EQ. All right, so if you need to copy those settings down, just pause the video. You're more than welcome to have it. I'm pretty sure I stole most of this from a YouTube video or something. So I don't mind if you steal it from me. My Reverb 3 is like a big reverb. So just like if I just want it, like just that really big ambient sound. This is a preset that I made. You're welcome to have it, of course. And an EQ. 16th delay, 8th delay, and 4th delay are pretty much self-explanatory. It's a 16th delay, an 8th delay, and a 4th delay. We do have EQs on there, as always. It's all the same EQ though. And that's just, you know, if I want a 4th delay, I can just, you know, if I, on my vocals, I want, so this is the importance of a template, right? So if I'm mixing and I'm like, okay, cool, I just want, you know, a bright reverb, I can just turn up this bus. There's no faffing around with settings or anything or loading up plugins. I've got a reverb that I really enjoy. I can just turn it up, boom. And if that doesn't sound right, I can try Reverb 3, boom. If it still doesn't sound right, then I can just go in and make a whole new reverb. But more often than not, between these two reverbs and between these delays, I'm sorted. If I need a little 4th delay, turn it up, sorted. Really, really quick, really, really efficient way to mix. A slap delay, again, it's a slap delay using the preset here and the same EQ as before. And then a little macro shift is just if I want to add a little bit of spread to any signal. So if it's usually vocals, I can just turn this up and it will just add a little bit of spread to my vocals. I don't use it that much, but because as you can see, I have it already on my all vocals. If I want to add some spread, then I usually just, you know, use this mix knob, but that's there if I need it, basically. I'm really powering through these, aren't I? So all of my effects goes to this all effects bus, and then that gets bussed to my all vocals. And the reason I bus it to my all vocals is because if I don't do that and I mute my all vocals, I'll still hear all the effects. So all the vocals are muted, but I'll still hear all the echoes and reverbs and stuff. So if I have it linked to my all vocals, when I hit mute, everything is muted and I just hear the instrumental, and that's how I like it. Then we have our master bus or our all bus. And on here I have the VMR, Pro Q2, the SPL Iron, which I'm liking a lot. And I have it with the parallel mix in the middle. And this is pretty much the settings I use all the time. I might change it a little bit, but this is what I I enjoy a lot at the minute for just a parallel mix on my master bus. This Cream EQ, I really love this presence section down here. The SSL compressor, again, I think I spoke about it before. I'll usually just have it like this and doing like -1 decibels of compression. This little gap here is where I'd put my SSL Fusion. So I'd bus it out to the SSL Fusion, where I'll usually add some low end and some drive and things like that. We've got a DSR. If it needs it, it doesn't always need it. Usually, you know, I might have cleaned it all up here, but sometimes there are some S's that make its way through, and I might slap this on there. The soothe, if there's any awkward high frequencies that just need smoothing out, I use this preset here, even more ear friendly, top on master. The FGX and the Brainworks limiter, I really like this limiter, but I use them both. So I would get a bit of volume out of this first. Sometimes I use this compressor as well, and then to really push it and to get a nice like ceiling on there, I'll use this limiter here. And that, oh wait, no, it's not the end. This bus here goes to my meter on my desk, my TC electronic meter, so I can make sure, wow, I just hit the mic. So I can make sure when I'm gain staging properly, and make sure I'm just always aware of how loud I'm getting and things like that. So that gets bussed to that. And then this all section goes to the master, which has my Sonarworks on there, again at 25%. And the reason I have the Sonarworks on this channel is because I don't want it to affect the meter, because the Sonarworks is going to pan stuff slightly, and it's going to adjust the levels slightly. So I need to make sure that what's going to my meter is true to what what's actually going on. And then the Sonarworks comes after it, so it can just clean up. It can just flatten that curve a little bit. And then when I'm ready to bounce the track, I will take the Sonarworks off, and then I'll bust this to, where is it? Bust it to my print, which is here. And then I'll bounce the track. And that's it. That's basically my mix template. That is kind of where I start every single mix. This is how kind of what I've worked on over the past year. It's, I plan to do one of these videos every year to kind of show you how things have changed. There's a few things here that have been here from the very beginning, but a lot of this stuff is new. A lot of this stuff changes all the time. So, I might find a new plugin, and this compressor here gets replaced by it, or there might be a new EQ that this gets replaced by. And that's kind of how templates are supposed to work. It's not meant to be a shortcut. It's just meant to be a time saver. It's just meant to be a way that you can reach your destination as fast as possible. And that, my friends, is another video. Like I said, I do plan on doing a video right after this. I'm gonna have some lunch and then do a video on how exactly I set up my mixes with this template, which I think would be really interesting. So stay tuned for that. If you like this video, drop me a like, drop me a comment as well. It really does help with all the algorithms, rhythms, and that stuff. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.